Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome to the July 2022 Roundtable. It's our birthday, and we're going to do a little bit of celebrating. I'm joined by some of my best investing friends on the planet, Mark Robertson and Cy Lynch. We're hoping that Hugh McManus is going to hook in with us before the evening's over, and we're hoping Kim's going to find the time from her caregiving to hook in with us as well and just say hello, if nothing else. It's going to be a kind of a packed evening, so I'm going to get us underway as quickly as I can. We do have some legal stuff to get taken care of. This is an educational demonstration. We're trying to show you how well a group of informed amateurs can do in putting together a portfolio and then managing that portfolio over a long period of time. This is our 12th birthday, as I mentioned before, and we're going to see some pretty impressive numbers coming out of this portfolio that is now 12 years old. If you're new to the roundtable and if you'd like to be added to our reminder list, and my wife is the one that manages that list, she promises she'll only bother you once a month. And if you ask ncavula1@comcast.net to put your name and email on the reminder list, she will add you to that list. And then once a month, you'll get a reminder that the roundtable's coming up, and there'll be a link on how you can register in that reminder. If you'd like a copy of the slides from tonight, they're not only posted on our YouTube channel, but you can write directly to Mark R. at manifestinvesting.com, and Mark will send you the actual slides. He'll send you a PDF of the slides. Questions about this evening to Mark or to myself are always appreciated, and we try to get you timely answers just as soon as we possibly can. And with all those endorsements and warnings and everything else, once again, this is for educational purposes. Make your own decisions about buying, selling, and holding. And we will try to remind you if we indeed hold any of these stocks in our own personal holdings as well. Sometimes being volunteers and getting involved in a lot of discussion, we tend to forget that one part of what we're doing. So know that we might hold some of the stocks we talk about in our portfolios. Let's turn it over to Mark now, and he can talk about our agenda.
All right, here's our standing agenda that we've basically been doing for 12 years. Again, welcome if you're fairly new to this. If you're joining us for the second or third time, we, again, keep it informal. We do an audience poll after the stock presentations.
Mark, I hate to interrupt you, but if we've been doing this for 12 years, I've missed the hot dogs most of the time.
Well, so that's
so have I, for that matter, Cy. What are you doing, Mark? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, the hot dog is just there to be a suggestive image.
Oh, nice.
So I thought we should look for our doorbells to ring or something with one of those delivery guys right there this evening, but evidently not, huh?
Well,
okay.
Just trying to work on the hunger reflex when it comes time for a certain stock presentation.
Okay.
But, we do keep track of the picks that we make, whether they're by a knight, a guest damsel, or the audience, and we'll go over that. We do have a form of portfolio management. Now, it is a tracking portfolio, which means it's got quite a few stocks in it, but we do take care of it very much like a portfolio and demonstrate at least the first level type treatment of many of those type of concepts. The three presentations that you will see tonight are Ken and Cy with those repeat selections. A little bit tired, but we'll let these two guys go again with First Foundation and MKSI, and then I of course have this exciting new stock to look at, the Portillos.
You better watch out, Marcus. Si and I are going to form a coalition.
Yeah.
You're not going to get any votes. Okay?
Oh,
That's right.
I think the coalitions form every month against me. So.
Uh-huh.
All right. If we have a little bit of time left over, we'll basically open the floor for questions. Here's just a quick reminder that we have been doing this for, like I said, 12 years. It is a birthday. And we're just trying to share an idea and go through the analysis of that idea. We do try to maintain a portfolio that maintains an advantage to the Wilshire 5000 of 5 percentage points. So much like an investment club, we're trying to beat the stock market by 5 percentage points. And we would like to see the majority of our selections actually outperform the market over time. Here's a quick look at how we're doing. And the way that you read this is obviously it's years across the x-axis. The y-axis happens to be the relative return. Now, the relative return is actually pretty simple. It's just the answer to the question, how are we doing versus the market? So in this case, the rate of return calculated for all, it's actually almost 700 decisions that we've made over 12 years is 16% annualized. If you had made the same amount of money invested into the Wilshire 5000 with, as it says there, mirroring investments, that return would be 10.3. So 16 minus 10.3 leaves you with a relative return of 5.7%. And it's at this point, I think we do a little applause and celebration. I'm going to have a little beverage here. Sound effects again.
I hope that's Sam Adams, Mark. Okay.
Well, unfortunately, it's not. It happens to be a little Mountain Dew, but you guys can all pretend.
Okay.
Sam Adams hard seltzer. And if you haven't gone out and bought some hard seltzer from Sam Adams, please do so. Either drink it or pour it down the drain. We have an inventory issue to take care of. You guys are tired of that message yet? All right, and we have had a little bit over half of our picks have actually outperformed the market. So again, I think it's worthy of celebration. We are hovering near 6%, and it's a nice place to be. All right. One of the things I thought we would do for just a few minutes, we did this a little bit this afternoon. So if you're with us during the Tuesday afternoon bull session, you've already seen this. But what I did here is I went back and just grabbed all of the transactions and sorted them by the worst relative return. In other words, the ones that have performed the worst versus the stock market. And that's that final column on the right. So the actual annualized return for the company in question minus the market return over that period of time gives you that relative return. So again, it's no surprise GE has been quite a disappointment. As much as we like the company, I still own shares of GE. It just simply hasn't panned out very well, and hopefully the new management will get the wheels back on the track and go forward. But so starting up at the top there and going down to the bottom, you actually start making pretty good progress pretty quickly, as you'll see from the next slide. But I really had a lot of confidence in my A2 milk presentation. A lot of you went along on that ride with me. I'm sorry. I really thought that one was a decent idea that could work out. We got kind of messed up by infant formula and China, but that one has actually proved to be a pretty not so good investment. My Body Central one, we talked about it this afternoon. That was my demonstration that a company can go bankrupt even when it has no long-term debt. And if you're curious about that one, you should dig in and figure it out, because they had liabilities that I failed to account for back at the time when I made, again, one of those almost perfect stock presentations back in February 2014. And you can actually go back on the YouTube page and watch that presentation. Although I think with technical difficulties, it may actually disappear from the planet at some point. We have a couple of requests this afternoon for old YouTube sessions on the roundtable to actually make them disappear. And I think Ken was interested in fossil disappearing.
Well, no, I still stand by the fossil presentations. The one that I'd like to see leave the planet is the wrap technology presentation, which in retrospect was just it was barking right from the moment I mentioned wrap. So
yeah, that was October 20 on the same night that Kim picked cricket, and neither one of those worked out very well. And if you guys may recall, it's actually kind of an entertaining session. We're kind of wondering where these ideas come from. And Si, I have to tip my hat to you, Si. You've only got one name on here, and that one actually turned around and did pretty well after this time span. And if you recall, you and I were both interested in United Natural Foods
Yes.
back in that time frame.
Yep, I remember.
But the ones that are highlighted and, basically with the yellow highlighting are closed positions. Therefore, they have end dates when we actually close the transaction down. And the ones that are without highlighting are current active positions. You guys pretty much know by now, unless you're here for the first time, that there are a group of us praying for Ardelyx. And that is still an open position, and I do own a number of shares of Ardelyx as a speculative, certainly a non-core investment. If you can even call it an investment, it's actually more of a speculation. PayPal, of course, has suffered due to some of the stuff going on in that marketplace. All right,
it's kind of akin to picking 16 on a roulette wheel, isn't it, Mark? Or maybe even worse than that. I don't know.
I don't know. Did you buy your Mega Millions lottery ticket yet?
Okay, there we go. Maybe it's akin to buying a Mega Millions lottery ticket. Yeah.
Folks, I tried to get Ken to put that in the poll when we go to vote later, and he wouldn't do it. All right. Here's the flip side. This is sorted from best to worst. The selections that we've made over the years. Many of you are very familiar with the stuff we've done with Universal Display, and that has been a joyous ride. Many shareholders I have actually owned that. I do not own it now, but I have owned it in the past. And Si, you'll get a kick out of this one. I think this slide actually is proof of larceny in progress, because Simulations Plus is a Ken Kavula idea, and you'll notice that we borrowed it and wrote it to victory.
Right.
And you may recall, guys, that Kim actually brought up this biospecifics, and you can see that we jumped on that bandwagon. And Ken, I think you jumped on that bandwagon. So
I did. Uh-huh.
There's a number of times when we have actually thrived on ideas from other people, and you guys all know that's a fairly common theme around here. It's actually a great thing, and pretty good distribution of positive results here.
And Mark, just to reminisce a little bit, we talked about Peyronie's syndrome and de Kuiper's syndrome in relation to biospecifics. That was the two syndromes that biospecifics had treatments for, and in fact, they've now become staples on the television advertising. Peyronie's is that bent carrot commercial, and the other one is the people sitting around the table where the guy says, please try to lay your hand flat on the table, and they can't do it. So Biospecifics was taken private by another company, but both of the products that they rode to these really nice returns on actually made it to market and are being sold today.
Cool. Just a couple of other footnotes. When you see them bolded in here, that means those were decisions that were made for us by another company. Those are acquisitions that you see bolded in the price column. And again, pretty wide distribution of very positive results, and these do make quite a good difference. Amgen has been pretty hot for you. That is an active selection that's stayed pretty high on the list, and you can see these three at the bottom have been pretty good, including that recent selection of Green Brick, which is doing a lot better than I actually realized. Okay, so moving on, this is the one that I think it really, where it comes home to roost. These are not on that preceding page because the relative returns just aren't high enough, but they're still extremely high when you consider the amount of time. Look at these purchase dates. Some of these are some of the oldest positions in the portfolio. Jennifer asked in the green room about Microsoft. We've obviously been a Microsoft fan for quite some time, and we continue to hold that company in pretty high regard. And so you can see all the way across the way that we keep track, and These are some pretty spectacular returns on Microsoft. That is our largest position. We'll look at that in a second. And really nice returns here in this relative return column. And then, of course, we do like to celebrate that Costco single time selection. $1,000 invested into Costco is now worth $11,000. So, words of wisdom from Charlie Munger. And I think that can be one of the best decisions that you ever make with investing is to let them cook for a while. I don't know how many times Cy tells us be patient and wait.
We should emphasize that what you just said about Costco, Mark. Each of those lines for Microsoft represent $1,000 invested at the date that you have marked with the arrow moving down. And each of those is a 10-bagger plus for Microsoft. You hold it for a long enough period of time, and you're getting 1,000 into 10,000 pretty nicely. You know, that first position that we had back in April 2011. That's 11 years old now, but it's taken the 1,000 and moved it to 12. That's really high class investing in my mind.
And now I did want to put Cognizant Technology up here or EPAM, but I couldn't fit it on the page, Cy. You've selected it so many times.
Oh, geez. That sounds like quite an excuse.
All right, moving on.
Cy, did you notice the hamburger that he's offering everybody down?
I'm hoping everybody's noticing that hamburger.
Okay.
All right, folks, here is a look at the top 20 positions in the tracking portfolio. The legend up at the top tells you how many times the individual stocks have been selected. And just kidding, Cy, but it is 15 for Cognizant. So $15,000 invested into Cognizant is now worth 25. You can see that Microsoft has been selected 5 times, as we just showed you. The value is actually up to almost 66. So that's kind of the way you break it down. You'll see the Costco investment on here also at 11,000, and that's basically how you break those down and figure them out. Universal Display is now a 6-time selection. One of those positions was sold, but still doing pretty well on that one. Any thoughts?
Even our COVID stocks, Mark. I mean, even Booking, for example, which is like 6th or 7th on the list there, and was chosen 11 times. Even it's making fairly decent money. I mean, Booking 11 times turned into 18,000, 11,000 into 18,000, and we know how badly Booking's been impacted by COVID and by travel. It's only recently begun to recover again. So I just think that this whole concept of buying great stocks at great prices and then holding them for as long as it makes sense makes a lot of sense when you start comparing numbers and comparing what our portfolio does to the thousands of other portfolios that sit out there for public inspection.
Yeah, and again, one of the questions from the green room from Jennifer, what do we think of Alphabet? I will tell you, Google, I almost picked Google tonight as the stock to present, and that's based on the strength of this growth rate, which is basically high teens, and the quality, exceptional quality, and a pretty favorable return forecast there also. So,
and Mark, if you would have picked it, it was on my short list as well. You know that already, and I was only afraid of what you might say if I picked it yet again. So I didn't want to have to be in that. Listen to that.
Now I'm a bully. Now I'm a bully, huh? Okay, all right. Amazon looks pretty good there too. That's old Hugh McManus. Oh, and by the way, the Amazon one is only a 2-time selection, resulting in this number. All right. So that is just the top 20. If you want to see the entire portfolio of active positions, just go to the link at the bottom of the page, and you'll be taken to that dashboard. All right. So here is a look at the 5 with the lowest return forecast. This is our hot seat treatment. And a lot of times we'll take and consider selling the companies that have the lowest return forecasts. In this case, Ritchie Brothers it's low, but it's not dramatically low. Again, we do like to bump this projected annual return for the portfolio up to get it in the sweet spot. So we're a little bit shy, but we're not going to do much good with Ritchie Brothers at 0.3%. It's such a small position. Still has a decent growth rate. So, it won't have enough impact to really do much with. And that is one of mine. I think I'd like to sit on my posterior and just let it go for a bit longer, maybe. Go ahead,
if we were managing, well, I was going to say what Si normally says here, just so he doesn't have to say it again. But if we were really managing a portfolio, we might consider selling all 5 of these to boost our par as close to the sweet spot as we possibly could. That par is pretty decent at 15%, but with the market having an average of just under 12, the sweet spot begins at around 17%. We might be able to do a little bit of damage. This would be, what, 2, 3, 4, about 5% of the portfolio if we were to sell all 5 of them, right, Mark?
Yep. I have a hard time letting go of Costco, though.
Well,
Right.
and because of
Don't
the kind of
fall in
portfolio
love.
it is, yeah, exactly. And
I like patience, but don't fall in love.
well, that's why we still have our delics on the on the active list, isn't it, Si?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. And one more thing, just to point out, I won't repeat what Ken said, so I'm not saying the same old thing again, but also remember, if this were a managed portfolio, you would also potentially get a boost to par by selling, and because you would reinvest the proceeds.
Absolutely. And also look at the growth in all 5 of these companies. I mean, while it's not terrible growth for some of these companies, it certainly is growth that's below average. When you look at the average, stock is giving us 11.9 today. So all in all, I understand why you want to keep them, Mark, and let's just keep them,
Yeah, we can jettison them all at some point. I will point out that we do have a pretty decent mix of companies with a 12% growth rate. Here's a quick look at Ritchie Brothers, by the way. Again, it's a fairly interesting picture. You could probably make a case for a slightly lower growth rate, but pretty decent numbers. Morningstar does think it's dramatically overvalued. Not sure what I think of their opinion. Value Line also says it's over. Maybe I'm changing my mind. Okay, that one's gone. Okay. Maybe we'll do the one sacrificial selling for tonight.
Okay, Ritchie Brothers gone. All right,
Okay.
Got it.
We also like to look at the rule of 5, where we basically
he had to get things that he had to get in our good graces before he popped this slide up.
Before we get the steak and onion sub, right? Okay.
And the Ardellix sob store and Boston Beer sob store. Pride in his beer too.
Boston Beer is showing up on a number of lists here again. Yeah, we do try to keep track of companies that are lagging the market by more than 20%, and that's what this list is. Again, we're giving Ardellix that pass for what is it, Ken? A price to hope ratio?
Price to hope, right?
It's a price to hope situation, and we hope that'll be okay. Boston Beer shows up here because it has
You are going to report that their reverse split was rejected by the regulatory agencies, weren't you?
I was going to forget it, but you didn't.
All right.
I've blocked it out of my. Well, it's actually, I think the shareholders blocked it, if I'm right. Anyhow, the other condition we will watch for is for a relative strength index to be either very low and very attractive, or very high. Very high being above 70, very high above 80. Again, it's just a stock that is hot and could be considered for selling. And believe it or not, Boston Beer's been hot, so has CBOE Global. And I don't think any of those companies merit a sell based on their momentum, in my opinion. And again, the reminder that we constantly give is that a stock can stay overbought with a high relative strength index for a long time, in some cases years. So it's just a reminder that it can be a time when you call a timeout and do a selling analysis if it makes sense.
I'm going to respond to Kevin Galagli in the audience. He's identifying that sandwich as an Italian sandwich from Chicago. I have to stand up for Flint, Michigan, that only has two culinary delights. One of them is a Flint Coney dog, and one of them is a Big Jog steak and onion with hot peppers. And I'm pretty sure that's a Big John steak and onion with hot peppers there, Kevin. We'll have to ask Mark for the defining vote. But
we will get to that. I don't believe that your company's publicly traded.
Oh, it isn't, no.
So here's a quick look at one of Ken's favorites, is UFP Industries, and that's just chugging along pretty well. I don't think we need to run for the hills on that at all. Very high return forecast, even though it has actually run up in price fairly quickly, fairly significantly. All right. So with that, let's launch our first stock presentation. It is a repeat selection. So Ken, go ahead and show that you have some imagination and here. Go ahead.
Okay, I will, but I want to welcome Kim Butcher to the back room. And Kim, we're so glad you're able to make it with us for a little bit of time here. And maybe we can get Kim's slides accomplished as well this evening, Mark, okay? This presentation was first put together a year and a month ago. In June of 2021, I presented First Foundation. It is a small asset manager, read bank, if you will. And what I did was I went through and completely updated the entire presentation, but tried to keep the look exactly the same. Next slide, Mark. The assets for this company, it's a very small asset manager, about $10.5 billion. And I'm not sure where that box is coming from up in the corner there, Mark. Is that on your machine or my machine?
Oh, I think it'll fade out if I just stay away from it.
Okay, all right. $10.5 billion in bank assets, and you can see the other assets that it carries. It does a lot of personal banking, a lot of private banking, a lot of business banking, but it does do traditional banking as well. And you can see that its target clients are a little bit different than just folks walking in off the street. They do focus on high net worth individuals for the most part, as clients for their particular bank. Next slide, Mark. They have some very definite geographic footprints, and what I like in the last year is that they've grown from their footprint that they had a year ago. They've added a footprint now in and around Naples, Florida. Naples, Florida to Marco Island, Florida. That's blown up in the little box on the map. They have headquarters in Dallas-Fort Worth area, and then their major banking is in the Los Angeles area, the Las Vegas area, and it moves up the coast into the Bay Area. They also have some banking going on the island of Hawaii. MSA, there's all kinds of acronyms all over banks. But MSA in the title of this map here stands for Metropolitan Statistical Area. So it's not even a bank term, it's a demographic term, but it's just identifying the different metropolitan areas. You can see over on the right, if you have any desire to read those small letters there, that they're looking at really high growth population centers to place their banking businesses, to place their outlets for the bank. You wouldn't even necessarily call them branch offices because they all don't even have tellers or anything like that, but they do have offices where they can do this private type of banking and loans and working with business people and everything. And again, focusing on high population growth areas in mainly the far west, and now beginning to move into the deep south. Next slide. They like to involve 3 generations in a family if they possibly can. They like to begin with the boomers that have the money that they can be enjoying right now, the Gen Xers that are focused on growing their money and getting a nest egg large enough that they can retire on, and the millennials that can begin building the nest egg and learning about investing so that they can handle the money that's going to be transferred in the next 20 years. If you look in the bottom of the slide in the very middle, I think it will boggle your mind. My generation, the baby boomer generation, is going to transfer $48 trillion to their children in the next 20 or so years. The biggest generational wealth transfer ever. So that is the kind of money that First Foundation is trying to capture and then to put into growth areas, so that kind of transfer of wealth can be perpetual from generation to generation to generation. Next slide.
So when I get my inheritance from you, it'll be part of this great wealth transfer. Big piece of it.
Yeah, keep looking at your calendar, Mark, okay? Yeah, right.
You are old, Mark, but you're still a boomer. I think he said intergenerational.
Yeah, I'm not giving boomer to boomer, no. All right. The loan portfolio is a little bit different than a traditional bank might be. You'll notice on the total loans, that gold piece, that's single family loans, basically mortgage loans. And for this bank, it's around 12%. For a traditional regional bank, that number is usually more than 50% for single family loans. And that multifamily, that's the kind of royal blue color, the largest band. It says 42%, 47% maybe it says. That's the largest portion of their loan portfolio there. And you might want to read condominiums when you're reading multifamily kinds of things, not necessarily apartment houses, more like condominiums, things that people will buy rather than where they will rent. The total loans by state, this is still basically a California-based bank, but notice that one purchase in Florida, that acquisition in the Naples area in Florida has now become about 14% of their loans. So they haven't moved into Florida in a small way. It's a pretty good sized chunk of their total loans. Next slide, please. The lines are beautiful, and I'm directing your eye to the very bottom of the page where I'm looking at return on total assets. I told you that 1.25 is a tremendous number. And for the last 2 years, First Foundation has been able to achieve that return on total asset number of 125. I think if you look back over the years, you'll see that basically the company's been growing that number. And now if they can maintain that number for 3, 4, 5 years, we are truly looking at a superior bank. So far, we have a 2-year set of numbers going, and I'd like to see this, continue in for the next 2 or 3 years at least. You can do a pretty traditional SSG if, in fact, the assets, that's that aqua colored line that I've added to the SSG up in the graph. If that aqua line is roughly parallel to the green line and the blue line, that's assets. And you can do a pretty traditional SSG based on the sales line or the aqua line, whichever one you want to use, I'm using 15% growth in sales or assets, and I'm using about 13% growth in earnings per share. Next slide. You notice that the PEs have been moving down, and we know that as interest rates move up, and we know that as inflation moves up, interest rates will, PE values will tend to move downward. And I'm looking at columns D and E, and I'm noticing those PE values moving down to be in the low teens at the high side, and maybe the high single digits at the low side. I decided to use 14 going forward, and 6. That's an average PE of about 20. That compares to manifest call of an average PE of 11. I certainly think I'm in the right ballpark. I'm using an 18% payout ratio. The last trailing 12 months payout ratio has been just under 18%. So I'm just staying with where it is right now. And I'm getting par values of around 20%. Next slide, Mark. When I compare that to manifest with a par value of 23.5, I feel that I'm getting really great validation from manifest investing for my own study. I love to look at these chronicles, and Mark, I would put at the very top of my list for any improvement in the chronicle. When Kurt did a little bit of dealing with the chronicle, he moved the legend box over so that it covers the last part of a really good quality line. If he could just move that box, boy, that would help an awful lot to give us an idea of where that quality line is going. I'm assuming that the last 3 or 4 quarters that we have on this graph are moving in an upward direction, and I like to see that in any company that I'm buying, either a great consistent flat quality line somewhere, above 80, or a quality line that's moving up. The current quality is 93, so it would be about where Mark has just pointed to on the graph right there. All in all, I think that this represents a real opening for investors, and that's to, if you don't have a bank in your portfolio, I would suggest you put a bank in your portfolio. And Mark, contrary to popular opinion, I try to keep my bank holdings to somewhere around 9 to 12% of my portfolios. They do not dominate my portfolios at all. Okay,
folks, that's just because he drools every time we drive by banks. All right, thanks, Ken. All right, let's get our update on MKS Instruments. It's been good to us, and let's hope that it continues to shine.
All righty. Nothing wrong with banks, Mark. That is where the money is, but I think there's a bit more money in chips right now. So, or chip suppliers, because that's kind of the key thing to remember about MKS Instruments is they are a supplier to microchip manufacturers, and we'll review that in more specifics over the next few slides. You could see here sales growth is quite consistent, especially for a company in the semiconductor related industry, because the semiconductor industry does have ups and downs. It is somewhat of a cyclical industry, and so this is an example that you could see of a growing yet somewhat cyclical company. If you go way back into history and look at Intel, you'd see something similar. A more recent pick that Ken has talked about, A&D, would be similar. Look at your Skyworks slides, and so forth. Those are some pretty popular semiconductor companies that would be examples. And then you could see that Value Line has some pretty aggressive, both intermediate term, 18-month price appreciation, as well as long term. And again, that's useful to look at because I'm going to do something a little different with my projections or my SSG tonight, and be super conservative, intentionally so. Next slide. I just ranked the tracking portfolio, and the highest potential return of a company that I follow and that I particularly liked was MKSI, and I do think it's well positioned right now, and we're supposed to be bringing our best pick, so I did. Also, I thought it was fitting for the anniversary, for the birthday celebration, because this is the 3rd anniversary of my first selection of MKSI.
Okay.
It was back in July of 2019. So next slide. Just a quick industry study ranked by quality. You see really all of those blue companies are outstanding quality, not that much difference, although you do range from 100 down to 98 for MKSI and even 87 from MESA. But it's by far the highest quality and highest return combination. So a good winner in the industry. Next slide. Also, although it's really not something I looked that closely at, but with the MKSI, it was just interesting. Look at the whole technology sector. And we talked earlier in the green room about technology stocks being kind of beaten up a bit and some price pullbacks, which may lead to opportunity. And you see, again, ranked by quality, MKSI is one of the highest quality tech companies and is the highest potential return using manifest projections for high quality tech companies. Next slide. I'm sorry. This is the tech sector comparison. Again, it's the highest return in a bunch of high quality. Next slide. The previous one was just the other side of the industry. Next slide. All right. Yeah, just a review on what MKSI does. They started out essentially in instruments, primarily measuring fluids and gases in the semiconductor manufacturing process. And they have been, since about 2015, been leveraging that business, expanding into related areas. And they're in the process of an acquisition of a fluid supplier to semiconductors that will just about double the size of the company. We'll look at some of those specifics. But they have grown from just semiconductors into, as you can see down here, fiber optics, flat panel displays, lasers, and solar cells. So they're really getting into a wide range of higher technology manufacturing customers. Next slide. Again, as I mentioned, pressure and flow was kind of what they started in, gauges and valves and so forth, and they're moving again out of just semiconductors into some of those other areas. And let's get out of the words and get into some pictures mixed with words. Here's again that semiconductor, then the advanced electronics is what they're moving into and have been moving into for the last 5 to 7 years. That's the solar cells and some batteries for electric cars, that sort of thing, getting into specialty industrial, which is much of the laser areas as well. Next slide. Again, as of last year, semiconductor manufacturers, and again, remember, they are selling to companies that actually do the manufacturing. So sometimes people say, gee, I want to be in an industry, I want to be in an area, but I don't really know which particular stock to pick, an Intel or an AMD, so Advanced Micro Systems. So I might consider an ETF or something. Well, MKSI is selling to all of those people. Taiwan Semiconductor, you saw one of the earlier slides. That's a semiconductor company and one of MKSI's significant customers. Then you see the advanced electronics, and then they're getting into specialty industrial, life sciences, and industrial products. Next slide. Here's just a quick summary. And again, notice they picked the 2015 because that's when they started moving into the advanced electronics and specialty industrial areas. And you see the advanced electronics have grown significantly faster, almost twice as fast as semiconductors. But look at the growth, even in the semiconductor, well over 20%. And also notice that they seek to be in the leading products, be the leader in their product categories. That means being number one or number two in market share. And they've over doubled that also in the last 6 to 7 years. Next slide. Just a quick, feel free to study this closer in the slides, but basically they're saying, you know, a few years ago, you had hundreds of components per device. And there are some of the components. Now you've got many more devices, not just solar panels and digital devices, but you've got the 5G solar panels, virtual reality, all of those things. And they have far more than hundreds. They have tens of thousands of components. So you've got complexity and capacity increasing, and that's where MKSI steps in and provides solutions for the manufacturers. Next slide. Again, laser is one of their areas that they are moving into more and more. Next slide. I mentioned earlier a pending acquisition. Atotech is the company. The acquisition was actually supposed to have already closed, but they're still awaiting China's regulator to approve the merger. All of the European and American approvals have been obtained. So they're hoping to get the Chinese approval and then go through with the acquisition that's also been approved by the company shareholders and boards. And Atotech is a chemical and fluid supplier to the same customers that MKSI is already serving, the semiconductors and the industrial processors. So it's a complementary selling more to their customers. And of course, there probably will be some relationships that they can leverage that Atotech may have more of an in with than MKSI does currently, and vice versa. Next slide. They're calling it the interconnect, which is, again, just the connection between the different processes, the physical processes by mechanical devices and by lasers, and the chemistry and liquid processes, and they're blending those together. And they believe that they can greatly expand market share by bringing those two together. Next slide. This again is just pointing out some of the places they think that Atotech will supplement areas that MKSI is either already in, like electrification and 5G and cathode ray replacement, some renewable energy, and then also adding some areas like wastewater reduction that they're not really in yet. Next slide. Just a quick financial summary. As I mentioned, it'll just about double the revenues and lessen that dependence on semiconductors from 62% to a little over 40%. And they'll be much more evenly split between the three areas. Next slide. Here are the judgments. And I said I did something a little different in my stock selection guide. Manifest consensus is projecting between 13 and 14% growth over the next 5 years, and that's in line with longer term what value line, and of course most analysts look at, and somewhere in that range is where I would be if I were doing just my quote normal stock selection guide. But you've probably heard about problems with semiconductors. Well, MKSI is getting squeezed on both ends. Their customers are having difficulty, supply chain issues, and getting all of the components to manufacture their products. So the demand is down a little bit right now for some of MKSI's products, as well as they are having supply chain issues of their own. And kind of the consensus belief based on both company projections as well as the analyst for 2022 and 2023 is around 7%. And so I said, let's assume that 7% is all the company grows for the next 5 years. Has the market overreacted to the bad news? And you'll see the rest of the judgments that I've had just continuing about current expense ratio, the current pre-tax margin, current taxes, and roughly current shares outstanding. They've been pretty steady over history. And that gives us almost $14 in earnings per share, growing at 7%. That's about half of Manifest and the consensus projections. Next slide. Using a high PE of 18 and an average PE of 13 times that almost $14 per share gives you still an extremely healthy potential return. And again, notice comparing that par, which is a very respectable par with a potential return using the high PE of 19%. Again, a very healthy return, but those are worst case scenarios as I see it. And a best case scenario is closer to that 24%. So I would be very happy with the worst case scenario because the market has just beaten MKSI, a market leader, down. So I'm adding another share and another position to the portfolio, and I invite the audience to do the same, and then we'll just be patient and watch the returns roll in.
Okay.
Cy, I have some decent questions here. Let me ask those to you while we're still fresh with MKSI, okay? Do you know where MKSI has their factories, asks Teresa?
Exactly no, but they are spread throughout. My recollection is some in Europe and some in the United States, and some in Asia, because again, their customers are throughout the world.
Janet would like to know if MKSI is going to benefit from this bill that's passing through the Senate and the House right now to subsidize chip makers. Is MKSI going to have any benefit from that you know of?
To my knowledge, well, I don't know the specifics of the bill. Since MKSI is a supplier to the chip makers, I would suspect they don't get direct subsidy, but anything that's good for their customers is certainly good for them indirectly.
And then one last question, Saibani would like to know if Atotech does not go through, would that be a big deal for MKSI, or would that just be business as usual for the company?
I think you just used the right words. It would be business as usual. I have been pretty high on MKSI, like I said, 3 years ago, which was well before the acquisition, and even more recently in the last 6 to 12 months, it still looked attractive, and I think has been beaten up enough in the market to be even more attractive without the Atotech. So I think you can kind of say that is a cherry on the top. And sadly, who knows, with all of the politics and especially over chip manufacturing and the like, that China may do something crazy and not approve it, but it would not drastically change my opinion of the company.
Thanks. I appreciate those answers.
Okay,
Mark?
we all set?
Yep.
Just had to revive myself a little bit. Well, I thought, we've talked a little bit about money, and that's kind of exciting, and a little bit about chips, but for investors who really want to sink their teeth into something, we've got this opportunity here. I mean, obviously the stuff on that screen is very, very desirable, and basically covers the full spectrum of the food groups. And although I don't see chicken nuggets, because I've been advised that chicken nuggets, at least in the newer generations, is a major food group. But they do have chicken sandwiches, and the company we're going to be talking about is Portillos, and it's a company that I just discovered has fairly recently gone public, and let's talk a little bit about them. It really comes back to a guy with a cart in 1963 in a suburb of Chicago, and this is Kevin Gologli is going to really know a lot about this one. They started with the cart and the food on the street corner, the side of the street. And they have been expanding ever since then throughout the Chicago area. It's highly desirable. People will stand in line for long periods of time. They actually did fairly well throughout the pandemic when others struggled because they so effectively handle the long line of cars getting their food. And you can see that it is considered, at least they consider themselves to be a Chicago icon, but they are changing that. We'll talk more about that. But great food for the last 60 years. And I love the quote there. I have a Portillo's hot dog in my purse right now. That pretty much typifies the type of thing you get. My wife loves the restaurant. We stop there anytime we get in the zone. And in fact, they love us so much that they actually have created Portillos in the state of Michigan, the first one in the state of Michigan. So this is cool stuff. Here basically is the whole story. This is a pretty well-run restaurant enterprise, and you can see that they are not in that many states. And look at the locations in Illinois. The vast majority of their locations are in the Chicago area, although they have spread out to Lincoln's home of Springfield and all throughout the state, Joliet. Most importantly, if it plays in Peoria, it's got to be a good deal. There's Peoria. And pretty much throughout the state, along with it, they could do much more in Chicago, in my opinion. And as Ken knows from our recent trip back from Dallas, these important key areas of Champaign are represented, and a whole bunch of different areas, including Joliet. But notice that they have obviously room for geographic expansion. And
I'm waiting for the chorus to rise up and start singing "God Bless America" in the background, Mark. Okay.
Well, they should be. So if we can get that going, we should do that. There is the Sterling Heights location. I will tell you that we sat in line for 45 minutes waiting for our hot dogs not too long ago as we checked out that location. So we are not alone in our affection for their product. And again, it's one of those type of companies that's I've always been fairly interested in the company. It's well managed, it's clean, the food is good, and they are obviously set up for very controlled expansion. The other thing to notice here is in the last year, although it's been slow, growth has slowed a bit. These stars point out the places where they have expanded. There's just a place in Florida, St. Petersburg, Joliet, and I think there was one other. They're not going hog wild with geographic expansion. So again, they just came public. Again, they have operating results going back to the 60s. But, excuse me, sorry. They just went public, so you're going to have a fairly limited field of stuff there. I may throw some more pro forma stuff in there if we bring them back for an encore repeat consumption in the future. But again, they seem to be stabilizing, decent growth, decent return forecasts, within 20% of their low price. We're probably going to take a position in this company with our family portfolio. I might wait for it to get a little bit less expensive, but who knows? Morningstar thinks that their fair value is as much as 46. So from a current price of 19.60, and they did get hurt today based on the Walmart news and the pain and agony in the retail markets. But the price to fair value is down around 40%. That's all fairly attractive, and I do think it's worthy of adding to the tracking portfolio and watching how well this company continues to roll out and feed people profitably. So with that, Ken, I'm going to go ahead and add Portillos to the menu. Encourage the audience to be hungry, stay foolish, and can go ahead and release the poll.
Okay, I'm going to put a poll up here.
While the poll is coming up, I will mention, remember that sandwiches go well with chips. And I really suspect that
Yes, no shame.
all of those places where you pick up your sandwiches, they have cash registers that have the other kind of chips in them as well.
So
You know,
here's our
Samuel
poll.
Adams is not on there. I imagine a good beer with that would go well too.
There you go.
Here's our poll, folks, and we'd love to see about 85, 90, 95% of you voting. It doesn't take anything. It's free. Just use your mouse or your finger and pick one of the three companies or choose none of the above. And then the winner of this poll will have $1,000 added to the portfolio, as well as the $1,000 for First Foundation, MKSI, and Portillos. We're up well over 80% now, so I'm going to give us about maybe 10 more seconds. We're up in the high 80s. Come on, let's get 8 or 10 more of you to vote, and we'll move over 90 here, okay?
Kevin Gologly's probably voted at least 8 times by now.
You think he has? Okay. All right, I'm going to close this down. We did hit 89% voting. So let's close the poll and share the results. And the results went to MKSI Instruments. So Cy puts a win on his belt. First Foundation with 25%, Portillos with 17%, and there's 6 or 7 of you that don't like any of these three. So Mark's going to have to bring in actual sandwiches next time to convince some folks.
It can't be ruled out, you know.
Okay, and I'm gonna hide the poll then, Mark, and we're ready to go back to where we were then. Okay.
Okay, here's just a quick reminder that we do archive all of these presentations. We did get reports from the Rocky Mountains in Denver that pretty bad storms were wreaking havoc with their internet. So they were concerned about whether this would be recorded. We will record it and place the archive here on the YouTube Manifest Investing page. And you'll see that we do archive all of the bull sessions and the roundtables and various educational sessions that we do. Please consider subscribing. We would greatly appreciate that. You can see that we are up over 900 subscribers. That simply means it's free. It simply means that you will be notified anytime new content is added. And again, it's not, we won't sell your email or anything like that. That sort of thing. All right. I forgot to take the July roundtable off it. That's our 12th birthday. Happy birthday, everybody. Ken and I do have an appearance coming up. That was originally a dual webcast and live presentation, but the face-to-face part of it has been canceled. We are going to do a webcast from Indianapolis on Saturday, August 6th. And the theme was, I believe we settled on backing up the truck.
Absolutely,
Backing up the truck along with some screening stuff and just some general good old fun, looking at some educational and investing topics. The August roundtable will be in about a month, August 30th. And we will be filling out a number of other appearances as we communicate with all the people that we once again saw in Dallas. And again, wonderful time in Dallas, seeing some people face to face and talking about future opportunities to get together and continue that. Any other
Yeah,
thoughts, Ken or Si?
Yeah, once we get to August, those of you that asked for Mark and I to travel to your chapter or to your area to put on a live presentation, once we get into August, if you'd like to drop me an email first, I'd be glad to give you a call and try to get something set up. I'd like to invite everybody to come to the Mid-Michigan Stock Pickers breakfast. It's on the morning of November 12th up in Saginaw, Michigan. We're going to try to do it live for the first time in 3 years, and we're going to cross our fingers and hope that everything works out. I know we're talking about a few months in advance, but we really would like to see a lot of you face to face and just put together a program of the kind that we used to do that were a great deal of fun, and on top of that brought people together to network with each other and allowed clubs to meet other clubs. It was a grand morning, and we'd like to duplicate that. So in the morning on November 12th up in Saginaw, Michigan, we'd love to have you there. We are going to stay on for a little bit right after the program to answer a few questions. But Mark, I don't have anything else to add to the program at this point. Do you or Si?
I'll just add one quick thing. Also, moving to in-person events, Atlanta chapter for the first time, I guess, in 3 years as well. Excuse me, the Georgia chapter, although it will be in the Atlanta area, is having their annual education fair in person. You can go to the Georgia chapter and get the details. That's August the 20th. So if you're anywhere in Georgia or the Southeast and you want to visit Atlanta and go to a Braves game or something, I would love to see you on August the 20th. I think Christy Powell is coming in and Susie Artsberger. And of course, there'll be a few other presenters along with their desperation pick of Cy Lynch. So
we'll put that on our list and publicize it as well, Si. Okay.
Absolutely. Si, do you know if they're doing? Is any of that going to be webcasted?
Not that I'm aware of, but that's a good question. If Claire is on tonight, you may want to stick your hand up, Claire, and answer that question, or consider webcasting some.
Yeah, it can be done. It's it's got its challenges, but it's certainly it's definitely achievable. And many of the chapters have gotten so good at the remote broadcasting stuff that it's quite feasible. All right. Anything else, Ken?
Well, we will answer some questions once we're off, and we have a couple hands in the air too, but let's close the program down first and then handle that, okay?
All right. Thanks, everybody.